So for this weekend, I went ahead and started Megasquirting for my 97 b14 200SX. That's what I'm Megasquirting. Why? Because the mass airflow sensor went wonky at higher RPMs and made the engine run lean because it's not reading grams per second correctly. I didn't want to buy a mass airflow to then have something else go out and then something else and something else. This was actually cheaper because I got stuff. So I got everything labeled here off my factory ECU connector, so I'm going full standalone. I'm starting with pin 1 is 12 volts to power the factory coil that's inside the distributor. Pin 2 I'm not using, but it's a check. The ECU checks the negative side of the coil to make sure that it fired so it can read an RPM. Maybe trigger a check engine light if the igniter goes bad. Tachometer output, pin 3. Megasquirt is gonna do that. There's the negative side of the fuel pump relay. There is a neutral position switch on the trans, which is kind of cool if you want to put a remote start, so that's your safety. Vehicle speed on pin 26 coming from the cluster. It's a pulse that I'm going to use to measure speed. The IAT, actually the car doesn't even have an IAT. I couldn't find it. It's not speed density, so I'm gonna have to put my own. These two are the cam and cranks. Hall effect coming from the distributor, which I'm assuming are 5 volts. I'm not using reference voltage. I'm putting my own sensor ground. I'm gonna have to attach into that the coolant sensor. I'm gonna calibrate to the factory coolant sensor. I got the specs up somewhere. I'm not using that. I measured 295 ohms at 170 degrees. As it cooled off, it went up slowly. This is actually just an RPM signal. It's the flywheel teeth. It's not used, in my case, it doesn't have a missing tooth. It's just there to measure misfires. I'm not doing knock. The throttle position has a close switch and the position. So here I wrote down that pin 6 gets 12 volts when the throttle is closed. You can use that for whatever. I'm not using the absolute pressure sensor. No evap stuff. I do have to power the ECCS relay. Hopefully I don't forget to implement that. Apologize for the music, it's not mine. So I figured all of this out with a scope. This is for the cam and crank. This section is ground 12 volts, and then those are the cam and cranks. Square waves coming out. This is that RPM check I was telling you about. This goes back to the ECU to let it know that it is firing, meaning that this guy is working. This middle wire is the trigger for the igniter, and I am assuming that it's 5 volts. If I'm wrong, please let me know, because that's how I built the Megasquirt, for a 5 volt pull-up. ground on the outside, and then this is the ground trigger to the factory coil. If this takes a dump on me, I will install MSD6A with the external coil. If I get tired of that, oh well. There is no room for coil unplugs. No pins left. Fuel pump relay. This is where the vehicle speed pulse comes out of from the cluster. The speed sensor comes in here, and then that pulse comes out on the purple red wire. That I'm going to feed into the Megasquirt. No evap. I am actuating the b14 solenoid, which I figured out comes on when warmed up off of idle up to 5400 RPM, then it shuts off, then it turns on again at 6600 RPM for overlap for power and stuff. This is a 3-wire pulse width IAC valve. I'm going to be using a big resistor on one end and just trigger the other end. I'm also controlling the AC. And the only wires I needed to tap into was at the ECU connector. I got pin 21 and 15. 21 is coming in from the pressure switch. Tell it, I wrote down that this wire is 5 volts when the system's off, and it goes low when the pressure is good, so that means turn the AC on. And then out from the Megasquirt to the relay, and this relay on its own will turn on the fast idle valve, so I don't have to do anything. This is the thermal protector for the compressor. I don't have to do anything. It works on its own. The fans, I do have to control. On mine, both fans apparently come on at the same time for the same ground. All these other relays I don't have, apparently, because it's for auto. So manuals are a lot simpler. One relay, both fans come on at one speed. I borrowed this, obviously, from another car. So I'm going sequential on the fuel side. There's no room to do sequential spark because I used all of the pins, outputs. I'm gonna short it out. Triggering the factory igniter off of LED 14, 270 ohm resistor in this heat shrink. Actually, no, that's not a resistor there. It's just a purple wire going to the ignition pin. But I got my jumper to VCC, or sorry, 5 volts. Jumper goes from the negative of the LED to 5 volts. It's a 270 ohm resistor. This is the mods to the MS2 chip for the additional drivers to power that. These are the 4 injector drivers. And all the yellow wires go into all 4. tested everything, all the outputs. I made a mistake. Before doing this video, I realized that I don't have a tachometer output built in, so I may have to get rid of that. Kind of sad. I have to find another way to spray the radiator because I'm controlling idle. That's for spark output. That cuts the fans at a certain speed with the AC on. This is controls the compressor, variable valve, timing, radiator fans. So I was going to use that to spray the radiator. Now I forgot that I need to have a tachometer output. Unless I can create a tachometer signal off of some other aftermarket device, maybe from MSD. Got my AC controls here. As you can see, low, meaning going low when I have 0 volts at the input. Comes in on JS5, b14 powers the compressor. My ignition settings are set to be this, using the 24-1 wheel from DIY. This is apparently what I need to get started. This is going to be video 1 of my install.